All right, our Sense and Signal podcast fan base. We are the millions of you tuning in every week to hear me and Jodah expound on things like artificial intelligence. Well, we are back with another episode this week, and Jodah has been doing a deep dive, some inquiry into how we can, the practical uses of artificial intelligence like ChatGPT. Last week's episode focused on more philosophical concerns, and that will certainly be in this episode as well. But I know Jodah wants to see if we can make some progress in having a conversation around practical applications of artificial intelligence in your work life. So what do you got for us, Jodah?
Yeah, exactly. And thanks. That's a good way to think about it. So, there's been a lot of conversation around artificial intelligence, deep learning,
Really?
machine learning. Yeah, really.
I've never heard of this stuff.
and if, as we mentioned last week, a bomb seems to have been dropped right around, especially with ChatGPT. And I don't think we can go into the deep dives of the distinctions of the type of automation and sort of and AI as a form of automation, right? It's the automation of mind to some degree.
Parts of the mind. Now, let's be careful here. Right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking where it's supposed to be going, right? Yes, yeah. Again, I'm not questioning on how well it does anything right now exactly. I'm just saying that, the conversation, what its intentions are, right? And it feels hocus pocusy, and it is for much of it.
It's pretty magic.
It is a lot of magic going on there. It seems like, and let's not dismiss the hard work that a lot of people past 50, 60 years have put into. I mean, this stuff is built on the shoulders of giants, and ideas that have been percolating for tens of years, hundreds of years, perhaps even. Who knows? Anyways, all right. So I'm going down some rabbit holes. So let me dial it back. So yes. There's all this like waxing and waning on where we take it and what we're supposed to do with this and its implications, which are probably the most important things that I actually care about. However, what about a leader in an organization? What are you supposed to take away from this? And, I don't really have the answers, but you know who did? ChatGPT. it had the answers. Yes, it did.
Oh, so you did your research through ChatGPT, Jodah?
Yes, I did.
Are you sure? Are you sure there's not some bias on the old our new frenemy, the chatbot's perspective?
Well, it was because every time I asked it about issues around AI, it would kick off most of those around basically saying, although AI has great opportunity to improve the life of human beings, here are some concerns. So it definitely has its biases. There's no doubt about it. Now, like I did go out and do some.
It doesn't want to toot its own horn, right?
Well, it kind of does. But I did go off and do some other.
So it has a marketing aspect built into its responses. Adopt me.
I'm not sure if it's marketing. I don't know if it's a bias though. Right. It's definitely a bias.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into in a second. So, what is it that you as a leader or an organization, how do you leverage this stuff? Right. And I want to make two distinctions, AI and they might not be distinctions that most people make, but I want to make the distinction between AI and automation, because they can get conflated, right? Automation means it doesn't necessarily. Automation meaning things that are being done automatically without human intervention, that it can produce certain things, right? And that could be seemingly performing tasks. And those could be seemingly intelligent tasks, even though it has no sense of self or sense of you. The heuristics built into it are sufficient enough to make us think it's intelligent and give us actually actionable information. Then there's artificial intelligence, which is this notion of a thing creating that's actually artificially intelligent, or as Dan and I like to perhaps say, emergent, or what do we call it?
Constructed intelligence.
Constructed intelligence, right? Based upon rules that we humans have created, but it's supposed to be thinking one way or another. And again, I'm not going to philosophically get into what ChatGPT's in there.
Jodah, careful. Right. Is it really thinking?
Right. Not yet.
Do we know what thinking is?
Probably not yet, I bet. But it's enough for us to think it's thinking, and maybe that's all that matters. If we think it's thinking, or it can fool us, whether it is or isn't, right? So I feel like there's a good distinction, because the magic of ChatGPT makes us feel like, whoa! All of a sudden, there's this entity that can replace my job, as opposed to, whoa, there's this tool that can replace my job. And maybe the distinction is unnecessary. And we're not going to
there's this co-pilot, or there's this co-pilot that can enhance my job.
Or there's a co-pilot that can enhance my job. Exactly. So, yeah, Dan. So to your point, let's try this. Let's see if we can kind of reduce some of this down to meaningful, semi-actionable information for leaders. What do you think?
Well, this is your podcast, man. I'm on for the rides.
All right, let's give it a shot here. Let's give it a shot.
Tell us some of the things you found, and I'll help you out with throwing some suggestions into, or somebody consulting your notes as well.
Sure. So AI, or even automated systems, right? They're good at what we'd qualify as repetitive tasks or routine tasks that, and thinking systematically and consistently. And so really that's probably where the strengths of these systems lie, is where you want to try to reduce the level of noise and error. Right. And that's one of their strengths right now. Again, I'm talking about truth on the ground right now. It could change in the future. Where humans, perhaps their strengths are, well, one of our strengths is that we make mistakes. And from mistakes, new things occur. Right. So
like the Elon Musk SpaceX, the explosion of the rocket the other day. That was a big mistake, and got different perspectives on that. The mainstream media is saying it was a disaster, but the company itself is saying, no, this was a good mistake because we got data from it that we're going to use to improve in the future.
That's right. That's right. And those distinctions kind of conform to what I think is called Moravec's paradox, which suggests that what is easy for humans is difficult for AI, and what is difficult for AI, or what is easy for AI is difficult for humans. Again, philosophically, I don't know if that's totally true. Historically, kinda. And again, Dan and I will probably in other
I think there's a good example of that, right? I mean, complex data sets. I mean, our minds are the way our mind works. It's hard to keep track of multiple variables to make sense of complex data, whereas that is something AI can do very easily. AI, by contrast, is not a biological creature. We are embodied creatures, unlike AI, so we can make gut decisions. We are able to process information, maybe in a way that AI can't, to see signals in the environment that maybe AI can't detect, and make what are so-called gut decisions. And sometimes those gut decisions can be more accurate than data-driven decisions in some contexts.
Well, let's lean on a hypothesis. I mean, as of now, that I would agree with that as a working theory. You know, who knows where the change is, but let's double down on that as a reality for now.
Okay.
One of the key things, though, that it's an opportunity, it's probably a need for you leaders as we move forward, is that, and for the workforce, is that it's going to be probably increasingly needing to be adaptable. Right, things are moving so fast, and AI is contributing to this speed of change now, and it's only likely going to get faster because of the emergence from this technology and the recursiveness of it. And so it will probably feed into faster and faster changes.
And at the same time, it could just plateau. We're still in a period where we don't know. So there are those who would take the Kurzweil perspective, like we talked about in our last episode, where it will be exponential and we'll hit that singularity. There are others who are encouraging a more cautious view of that, less extreme view, and will point out, like, well, you could have a period of exponential growth, and then it might hit a point where you realize the limitations of the technology and it begins to plateau earlier than expected.
Right. Yeah. But if true, and if it's the other direction where things are speeding up, so to speak, then companies will probably tend to value workers that are adaptable, entrepreneurially in spirit, open to retraining, because they're going to have to be. So just keep that in mind as you enter the labor force, and as the labor force starts to change.
Let's hold on right there.
Yeah.
The labor force starts to change, because I think that is an important part of this discussion, Jodah.
Sure.
Headlines recently have been talking about, at least in Seattle, which is where I live, lots of school closures being talked about because of a declining student population, and that there's multiple reasons for that. But one of them is a declining birth rate in this country, and we've had for the last 6 years steadily declining birth rates. Part of that's the pandemic, but one could argue it's part of a larger trend too. Affordability, the cost of living, the cost of having a child, big impacts. And the projection is for birth rates that continue to decline, I think, well into 2040, 2050. And that's across all ethnic groups, all racial and ethnic groups. It's not just, one group that this is happening to. And so that means a smaller workforce going into the future.
That's right.
And so that's something we're going to have to contend with, and AI might be a solution to contending with that. And I'm going to we're already seeing some impacts on that in the workforce today. People are talking about a labor shortage. Well, part of it is tied to the birth rate, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive deeper in that a little bit later. But yeah, I've got some thoughts on that, and I do agree that AI, if there is an actual labor shortage, which I'm not saying there isn't a labor shortage, but where is it generated from?
Right, exactly.
Then yes, absolutely, right. So you could definitely bring that in, but be careful what you ask for, right? Because you could be the janitor for the AI system, as we discussed. But again, let's talk about that later on, under our cautionary discussion towards the end here. All right, so let's dive into some sort of this is just going to be a litany of things to think about. We're not going to dwell on too long. Dan and I will probably bring up some concepts on this, but this is going to be the first in a series of some didactic stuff on this episode. So, Dan, do you want to kick us off? So, ways AI can help leaders and organizations?
Well, the first one that you and AI listed for us here, Jodah, is decision making. Now, I could see where part of this podcast is about sense making, and sense making is the process leaders use to make sense of the world in order to make decisions. I could totally see AI being a tool that you use to gather information, gather data, to make decisions. What AI is not good at, as far as decision making, is judgment and rational thinking. It's very prone to hallucinations. If it can't make sense of the information it's gathering, it produces these so-called hallucinations, which are very convincing. I don't know how even to describe it. They will say the output will be something completely made up by the AI system based on its data, but it's not accurate. So I think, yes, it's a good tool. It could be a potentially great tool for helping us with decision making. And I'm thinking, again, Star Trek. If you remember the old Star Trek series where Captain Kirk and Spock would say, "Computer, give us information about this," and the computer would spit out information. But it was up to Kirk and Spock to make a decision about how to respond based on the information the computer was providing. So, yes, decision making. Definitely, it can help with that. It can help you with gathering data to inform your decision, but it's still incumbent at this point upon you as a leader to not take it at face value. Use your background knowledge to make sure that, is this making sense? Does this jive? You have a bullshit detector, right? So is the AI bullshitting me, and do I need to double check its information? So, but at the same time, very quick at providing information to help you make decisions. What are your thoughts on decision making, Jodah?
No, I think you nailed it. It's shit in, shit out as of now. I will take it. I will move us out 10 years from now. Right now, it's not good at certain things that you could say are the bullshit detectors. Let's not assume that's going to be true forever, though. It might be sufficient enough to be, or a sufficient bullshitter checker itself at some point in time, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. So you want to plan for that as well. you're going to, as a leader, have to, you're still going to need to understand what the intentionality of your company is, understand the needs of your workers to keep them happy, understand the goals of creating a relationship with you and your customer, whoever that might be. And up right now, AI probably won't be able to do that, but it will be
And
able to help you.
ethics.
Yeah.
And ethics. Yeah. It's not when it gets down to, okay, you've got to lay off this group of people and you know the negative impacts on their lives and other things. It's not going to have a conscience either, right?
Yep.
It's going to be ruthless in its recommendations for how to proceed and influence your decision making. So it's up to you to bring that human conscious and that sense of ethics to your decision making as well.
Again, for now, they are making empathy robots. So who knows where that goes? Okay, so the next one
empathy robots.
Yes, predictive analytics is another thing, right? So AI, and again, this is sort of automation in general, helps with predictions. In my field, in the security space, we use predictive tools, solutions. You can call them AI, but they're algorithms that munge data and are able to project effects of choices made on your IT systems, on your network systems. This is a form of AI. It's not one of self-sentience. It doesn't know itself exists. It's not that kind of AI, but it makes intelligent decisions. And so it provides a signal, as I like to say, to the people who are overseeing the network, about the state of their system. And then it helps them decide what they should do about it. They should fix it, not fix it, mitigate it, things like that. So yes, you can definitely, AI will definitely has and will, and you should expect to leverage even more. And when it comes to AI, that sort of intelligence, the chat GPT, it's going to start predicting behaviors of people that you interact with. And so
that's already been happening too, right?
Right.
I remember there's the old Target story. I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about in one of his books where they were using predictive analytics and algorithms to analyze purchases that people were making in checkout, and they predicted, they'd use it to target advertising to people in their mailers. And there was this young girl, she had bought some stuff, started getting mailers at her home recommending buying stuff for a future baby, like clothes and diapers and formula, things like that. And her father started looking at these and saying, why is Target encouraging my daughter to buy all this baby stuff? And he went and apparently yelled at the manager, but then found out a couple of weeks later that his daughter was indeed pregnant. And the company apparently, and maybe this is an apocryphal story, again, I'm just relaying what Malcolm Gladwell apparently wrote in one of his books, but the algorithm was able to predict based on her previous purchasing habits these conditions that were happening to her. I would say also working in higher ed, we've been working with predictive analytics too a lot. There's a lot of different companies trying to help higher ed educators predict when students are going to be in trouble and challenged based on multiple variables. Different schools are having different levels of success with that. I haven't seen a whole lot yet with that. I do think with predictive analytics, you have to be cautious too, because you're dealing with complex systems. And while AI at this point can help to some degree with complex systems and analyzing it, it still can't predict weather patterns accurately yet either. So there is a level of complexity where it does run into a wall just like the rest of us. So that might change too. And it probably will. And I think there's a philosophical, ethical aspect to that. How much do we want to reduce people to data? And brings in the whole question of free will and determinism and whether we really are making choices in our lives, or are we just subject to the forces and the momentum of our moment of birth and
marketing needs. Yes. I think it's been decided. I think Facebook decided that for us already. All right. What's the next one, Dan?
Talent management. Well, that's been happening for a long time too, right? So when you submit a resume, they scan it to look for do you meet the qualifications? So that's been going on for a while. And I've also heard that in terms of talent management, that AI can also help with personnel reviews. It can give you some text and some information to use to help guide you when you're doing a performance review for somebody. So it's about the recruitment and the management. Again, it's going to provide you with the data. You still have to make the judgment, and you also have to use that bullshit detector to make sure that the data or the recommendations or advice it's giving you it makes sense. I think when we had Zoe Fragu on in our first podcast with us, she talked about psychometrics, which is another tool that can be used by recruiters to identify whether or not your personality is going to be a good fit for the role you're taking on. And again, she cautioned not to just use it is a tool. The psychometric test is a tool, but ultimately it's the human being, the leader and manager of a department, that has to take that data and make sense of it. And there might be exceptions to what the algorithm or the AI bot or agent or co-pilot is recommending to you, and you still need to use your own discretion and judgment to make sense of it.
Yeah. I recently saw a thread on LinkedIn, someone talking about how I don't remember the exact specifics of it, but just discussing about how they felt or they knew that their resume or CV was sent through some sort of algorithm and it didn't get past the algorithm. And there were a lot of people responding to that. You don't want to be a company who's perceived as just being driven probably by these AI systems. It could be probably bad press on one hand, and to what Dan's point, the systems are only so good. They look at certain metrics and are able to probably predict certain things. But again, in the end, the strength of people is that they're human. And if you want a human in there, you don't want a robot probably judging that human. You still need another human to kind of go in there and manage that. So again, the suggestion here, from my perspective, is leverage information as signals. I know we use them as gates. We use them as a gate. So you get 100 submissions of talent and you let it give you the top 5, and that's what you go with. I get it, because there's a lot of people, and you're saving money by not having to hire other people to go through that information. And that makes sense.
Well,
but be careful with that as well.
It gets back to bias too, right? So yes. We use the term, you want to screen people in rather than screen people out. And it's very easy to screen people out if you're looking at very rigid terms, very rigid background experience and education, because there are transferable skills. And maybe not everyone needs a certain degree to be able to do a certain job. Maybe they've got it through the knowledge, through an experience, through other means. So at this point, I think these are tools, but we have to be very cautious about, they screening people out?
That's right.
Are they screening people out for unnecessary reasons? And, I think we are going to be going into a world where increasingly we're going to have to be thinking about transferable skills, and not being so rigid about where people are coming from.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't have proof on this, I haven't done a deep dive study, but knowing kind of the state of the way these algorithms kind of work now, and ChatGPT, again, it's kind of changing that because of the way it leverages language, and kind of figures out how to create ideas out of words. But right now, you could end up with a very linear thinking process if you leverage in your company, very narrow, limited thinking, group think kind of world, if you just simply leverage these machines to kind of decide.
Oh, yeah. So that is a huge danger. Danger.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's see.
Because again, going back to previous episodes, we know that strong teams are built off of diversity.
And there is evidence for that.
And it's not just ethnic and racial diversity, although that does bring a lot to the table as well, but also perspective, background, experience, all those and temperament, even all those different types of diversity add to a richer understanding. Because what ChatGPT does, in a sense, is draws a lot of collective cognition together, right? To bring information together, to feed it to you in one nice little synthesized chunk of paragraph. But your team, the team you're working with, is doing the same thing. They're your collective cognition, and you want a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives to inform your understanding of reality.
Yeah. But then again, you as a leader, you're going to take that information. You're going to have to make a decision. So, well, I guess it depends on how you're actually hiring people. So, all right. So, next one, risk management. This is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart because of the field that I'm working in right now, which is the InfoSec space. So yes, AI. Again, I'm going to kind of say automation, I guess, but machine learning. Definitely can help in identifying risk issues in your company. They can help you mitigate by by analyzing data from multiple sources and identifying potential areas of concern. Absolutely. And examples of this, that most of you probably know, fraud detection, right? Good example is I went to Europe recently and I started leveraging my credit card in Italy. Didn't work. And I checked my email and said, "Hey, are you in Italy?" So that, again, is that artificial intelligence? No. Is it an intelligent decision-making system? Yes. It recognized that I wasn't in America and it says, "Hey, is this fraud?" And this would be almost untenable to do manually, but you can do it with these automated systems and artificial intelligence systems. Another one would be credit risk assessment, supply chain risks, natural disaster risk management, and cybersecurity risks. Risk is important for businesses. If you can reduce your risks to certain issues or certain problems, that is technically reducing the risk to profit loss. And so when you're doing to profit loss and versus profit gains, you add those up together, and that can really affect the bottom line. So it's a huge thing, and it really does help automate that stuff. And it's kind of a space that humans can definitely leverage the machine world to see and utilize its deep insights. But again, they're just signals, and you have to keep that in mind. What are your thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, but I could see, I'm thinking in terms of crisis management, and in higher ed, we also have this thing called enrollment management. We're constantly looking at different factors that are informing the enrollment at a college or university. And I could see you setting up like an auto GPT type of assistant or bot, agent, whatever you want to call it, that's programmed to do the environmental scan, looking at the demographics of your catchment area, and seeing where the trends are. And that can definitely give you signals, and looking at what's currently happening in your enrollment. Where are the students coming from? Where are the high schools that are feeding into your organization? What sectors of the economy are workforce are coming to your campus, and also identifying emergent needs in the workforce around your catchment area to identify opportunities for new programs. So I could see some of that as a data collecting tool being automated and set up as a what they're calling now an auto GPT kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's do one more. There's a couple others, but Dan, you want to pick one more to discuss on the opportunity area?
Well, we got personalization, process optimization, resource allocation, and competitive intelligence. I want to talk a little bit about personalization.
Okay.
Because one thing I've been thinking about, and it gets back to changing workforce dynamics. And I want to say, we're going basically through a brainstorming session right now on this podcast. So nobody watches this later, come back and use this clip to kind of hit me during a job interview. Like, I heard you say this on a podcast.
We're shooting from the hip right now. Yes, we are.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a form, but I'm not trying to automate anybody out of a job, right? But one thing we are noticing is a steep decline in higher education and turnover in student services, and that is a lot of enrollment people whose job is to help students enroll and counsel them and advise them on what classes they're supposed to take and things like that. And in talking to a colleague the other day, she was saying that enrollment in the programs that often feed those jobs is at an all-time low. She's a graduate of University of Washington, and she was saying in the past there had been a 40, 50 person wait list to get into the program, and now they can't even fill all the seats to keep the programs going. So here's an opportunity, because I could see you setting up a chat bot that could help somebody with enrollment if you were to design it correctly and help them as a kind of a customized, personalized agent to help somebody through the enrollment process, through the advising process. Now, it wouldn't completely get rid of all those human advisor jobs, but it would change the dynamic, right? And would provide some automation that's customized and designed in a way that could help take down some barriers for students as well, save the college money, that could then be diverted to other resources as well, especially if you're having, turnover there. And this is not just at my school. There are articles nationally in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Turnover in that sector is at an all-time high because of low pay, because of the intense workload, and other opportunities that that skill set can get better pay at another sector of the economy, and so people don't tend to stay long because there are apparently lots of, again, transferable skills. So that's an example of how you could use AI to automate something and not necessarily hurt people, but also fill a gap, a need within the organization, and you're still not doing harm because those other people who are not staying in those positions are finding work elsewhere in other parts of the economy.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, it made me think about, you're talking about empathy, introducing sort of an empathy into the system, into the mechanics, right? That transcends that's not about the being centered from the human perspective, but from the machinery perspective. And that will happen. And I was thinking about that. Sorry, as you were talking, I was doing both. I swear, I was listening and thinking about it. And the idea,
you can do both.
I think I can, although I can barely chew gum, and anyways, or I can barely chew gum, period. Right. The ChatGPT, going to that version, the chatbots that we use, humans are, we think of them as being able to be, we recognize facial expressions. We're geared to looking at facial expressions. It's in our machinery. We are good at responding to those facial signals, but we're also very prone to biases and misinterpretations. Signal noise messes us up real easy, and there's not a lot. And it doesn't take much to create a noise in the signal. It could be a gesture of a finger to make you misinterpret that word that someone said. And computers can probably actually get through that easier. Systems, automated. And so you could see, people working with people, but being assisted by an AI system saying that person sounds like they're sad based upon that comment. And they are leveraging, algorithms. And so I can see some sort of like integrated personalization approach, right? Where, I have a way I deal with people all the time. Actually, let me say one thing. A friend of mine said years ago, the famous biblical phrase, treat people as you wish to be treated. And a friend of mine said
the golden rule.
He didn't agree with that. He said, treat people as they want to be treated. And I think that actually I felt that was a stronger statement. And I think that's what AI systems can help us do, is treat people the way they want to be treated based upon signals that the machinery is getting. Certain people are great at that, right? Certain salespeople, that's why they're good, is they can interpret those signals, know when to lean in, know when to lean back. But a lot of people aren't. Most people aren't that great at it. And I think, AI inevitably could probably help in that personalization area.
Well, I think there's danger in that too.
Of course.
Right? Like becoming too dependent on AI to do that.
But that's the cautionary tale for all these things, though.
Yes, for sure. But
that's the theme.
On my Facebook feed, I still get these advertisements about this robot, this AI robot that's supposed to help, nervous children or children who are struggling with social skills, to help them be more sociable. And I think that, that's not how you want to do it, because especially right now, AI is not at a point where it can mimic the empathy.
Right now, we would both agree that you need human intervention in all AI machinery, right? In the future, though, that might change. And I think as leaders, you need to recognize that, depending on decided. And on that note, let's move on to the next thing, because that is a thing as a leader. Okay. So we've talked about some areas of opportunity, and probably some of these things you're all familiar with. Maybe hopefully we kind of gave you some thoughts that you haven't thought about, but how do you integrate what as a leader, an organization, in this topsy-turvy world of AI now that we've been thrown into? And to Dan's point, is it how much of this is media hype and how much of this is actually a paradigm shift as we move forward? Let's assume this language assumes it's a paradigm shift, or this next thing sort of assumes it's a paradigm shift to some degree, but it also assumes that it could be hype as well. And so how do you handle this information? So how do leaders...
Well, I want to hold on there. I do think it is a paradigm shift. I think the term I recently heard used was kairos, a kairos event as opposed to a chronos event. So to use Greek terminology, chronos is time, and time's constantly changing. And kairos is a moment in time of extreme change in the human condition, or what's happening in human history. And I think this is one of those moments. I think, and it's, history is one of those things where you're living it, and it's very rare that you're seeing like, oh, this is a moment. Like when the printing press happened, I don't think anyone was thinking, oh, this is revolutionary. It wasn't until you stand back, by a couple hundred years ago, oh, that was really important, the invention of the printing press, because it caused all these ripples. But I do think from that scale model of thinking, when you step back and you look at from the launch of the internet to now, and probably 20 years beyond now, this whole period, 200 years from now, is going to be an incredible event of human, a transformational period of human civilization. It's just that we're in the middle of it. We're swimming in it, so we're not seeing it in its full perspective in some ways. But it is grand enough that we do know we can sense it's happening.
Yeah. I would tend to agree that this is probably pivotal, if not because of the specific execution of ChatGPT, although yes, because of what it represents, and it's opened our eyes to it. And so now it's created a snowball effect where even if ChatGPT isn't exactly what it is people think it is, it will be soon enough, or something will be soon enough, probably because just of the signal it's provided. So I agree. But could be wrong. So we will find out. But let's talk about, just from a leadership and a business perspective, an organization perspective, some methods or thinking about how to think about integrating AI and these things into your system. And for the sake of time, Dan, I think I'm going to just kind of rattle off the first three and pause and discussion around those real quick, and then we can finish it up if you want to take the last 4, 6, whatever. So the first one is identify your business challenges. Leaders should first identify the needs that you have that AI can help and address. These require a deep understanding of the organization's goals and objectives. So that's the first one. So focus on first start with your business. What are your challenges? The second one is evaluate the AI solutions, right? Once business challenges have been identified, leaders should evaluate the AI solutions that can address those challenges. There's a lot of solutions out there. And again, there's a lot of distinctions. What exactly is AI? What are we talking about? Are we talking about deep learning? We're talking about some sort of heuristic mechanism that is able to do predictive analysis? Are we actually talking about an artificial intelligent mechanism? Evaluate those things against your particular business needs. And then finally, of course, once you've got those two pieces, that plus that, now you got to develop your business plan, right? Leaders should develop a plan for how AI will be actually integrated into your organization. I think, Dan, I'll pause there, but I think the key thing there is focus on your business needs, not necessarily on the flashy AI. What do you need right now from your business?
Yeah, and I think I've already provided you with a great example within student services, and I think in higher education, and I think other schools, and I might even be on the back end of that wave and that suggestion, because I know schools are using chatbots to talk with students, and I guess I'm thinking
plenty of industries are. Every industry seems to be at this point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's ubiquitous. So you have these chatbots that customers engage with, and I'm thinking in terms of really scaling that up to meet other gaps. I know it's and to your point, evaluating how you want it to manifest within your organization, thinking about biases, thinking about what kind of interaction you want these bots to have with your, in my case, students who are diverse and coming from all kinds of socioeconomic and cultural backgrounds. And the great thing about it, I imagine we could customize things that could speak in people's language, native languages, and think about things like inclusivity and belonging and making proper cultural references that help the student feel like they belong. So I think there's a great opportunity there, and I think there's in evaluating it, thinking about the larger impacts too. Like, what about the employees that were in these positions that used to be able to do this work? Well,
That's right.
if you're not displacing them because they're not there anymore, then you're reducing harm as well. You're meeting your needs while not inflicting harm to any individuals. So I think it's a great opportunity there.
Yeah, and I think that leads into the next one, which is trained staff, right? So trained staff, the step 4. If you're the displacement question, companies, organizations always have those hard questions. Who do we keep? Who do we not keep? For what reasons? Right. I just listened to a podcast, I think one you just shared, Dan, where one company let go a third of its workforce because it was able to replace it with AI.
Yep. And it's happening, folks. It's happening.
Yeah,
Don't be naive. You want to see why the tech sector is imploding? It's AI.
Yeah. So there's changes. So my point being is, as a company who's focusing on creating new product, perhaps focusing on being stronger as an organization, producing more value and growing, think about training your staff. Perhaps it's not necessary. They're not necessary for that particular role anymore in the exact same way, but so that you, again, cause no harm. Think about moving them and exciting them, getting them excited about thinking new avenues and paths inside your company. Help them become better in the areas that might be interesting to them. And if at the very least, because you're a good steward, a citizen, to help them become better, so that if they are no longer necessarily needed at the company, they have some new skills that they can transfer to other organizations. Right? You're not just leaving an organization; you're leading people's lives, and think about that too as you move forward. So, trained staff, I think, is a big one. Part of what you just said, Dan, in regard to doing no harm.
Oh yeah, I think I'm always a bit. I work in professional development a lot, so I'm always a big advocate for training staff, and I believe that begins with just having conversations with staff about Chat GPT and AI and how it might possibly impact your particular work, and thinking in terms of value. What's your value proposition as a human being doing this work as opposed to AI? And I think that's there, because I think there are people. I went to a panel this past week at my college talking about AI and Chat GPT in particular, and there were suggestions made that I thought, to be frank, were unthoughtful.
Not uncommon.
Making recommendations about how to use AI as opposed to a human being. And there are times where that's going to be the case. I think the examples that were used by some of the people in that panel were actually inaccurate. And so and the danger is that there are going to be people who are going to come at this with not all the information and think, oh, well, AI can do this, but not have. I'm going to give an example, like teaching ESL students. Like, AI, for now, is not equipped to help ESL students. Most ESL students also also are impacted by what we call the digital divide. They are not necessarily always bringing a lot of tech savviness to their educational experience. And so there's dangers in recommending a Chat GPT bot for that student population. And beyond that, they do need that human interaction to be, because it is communications culturally based. It's not just language based, and it's also physically based. And they need to pick up on interpersonal cues and learn how to, pick up on gestures. And cultural references that a chatbot is not necessarily going to be equipped to do. And yeah, so there's dangers with that too. So definitely training and having conversations are really important.
Yeah, and I think when they say training, it's like training in the space of, the new technologies, right? And try to, keep them up to speed with modernity. Yeah.
Training the bots, right? Because there's going to be part of training the bots. There's also going to be training staff about how to use them, and also training for how to be a bridge between the information the chatbot is providing.
That's right.
And translating it to other people.
Right. Yeah. And living in this new world, just in general, right? This new world with these new entities that we're going to be working with. Yeah. So let's move on.
One of the areas.
Let's actually, for sake of time, let's move on to the next two real quick, which I think they're similar. Start small and monitor and evaluate. And this is something that's near and dear to you and me, because we talk about this a lot of time through like agile processes, right? You want small experiments and then monitor and evaluate those experiments. AI can be very disruptive, and you can introduce some incredible havoc potentially. We've all seen Terminator. We could end up that way, but more realistically, you could introduce a lot of noise into your system that you won't be able to understand how to accommodate for, because oftentimes we don't, even though we've built the AI systems, we don't always understand how their data emerges. So start small and make sure you understand what outcomes you're looking for from the information or the outputs that you want from the AI system that you're integrating. So, Dan, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm always in favor of starting small and taking an agile approach, and continually assessing and making incremental improvements and slowly scaling up. Yeah, I definitely agree with that for sure. And as I'm thinking about it, it's definitely something that would inform my approach as a leader in scaling something like that up. Because you need to test it and then refine it.
Yeah.
Which is what's happening with the whole ChatGPT process too, with between 3 and 4, and they're doing that. They're collecting data and retuning the systems as well. So that has to be part of your approach.
Yeah, for sure. The next one, which I think is a biggie, is one that I think Dan and I will probably continue to have conversations around, especially, which is ensure ethical use of AI. And I know you have thoughts on that. What do you think? We've been talking about it all. Yeah. So what's your takeaway on that?
Well, I think the ethics. You can look at ethics in multiple different ways, right? You have an ethic of care. You've got an ethic of justice. You've got all these different kind of ethical frameworks. But I'm not going to get into those. I'm just going to say that we've already talked about harm, which would, I guess, be an ethic of care approach. Are you doing any harm to people by implementing AI through displacing them from their jobs and causing harm that way? There's also being very conscious of where the information that AI is drawing from comes from. I'm calling it, there's the supply chain talk. We talk about supply chains a lot, and I know in our conversations about blockchain, one of the benefits of blockchain is being able to see the supply chain, so you can make ethical decisions about where your product is coming from. If there's a place in the blockchain or a place in the supply chain that you don't agree with, right, that you think the labor policies there are unethical, then you cannot buy that product and say, okay, I'm not going to do that. The same is true with information. I think you're going to have this information supply chain occurring with AI, and you're already starting to see backlash to some of that. Like some companies that the AI used to build its database, like Reddit, are now saying, "Hey, you need to pay us for this content that you drew from." So there's the financial exchange, like have companies been compensated for the data that they have provided? And then there's, the tuning and the tagging of information. And as we expressed in the previous podcast, and I'll reiterate again, we have to be conscious in that information supply chain that at least for some of the current chatbots, there were companies in Africa where employees were paid $2 an hour to tag information that was from the dark web, from the darker parts of the internet, so that you're not having to see it as a primary user, right? But know that low wage labor, is sanitizing your AI experience, and it caused a lot of trauma for those workers as well. To the point where I believe, based on the article I read, that the company suspended their contract with OpenAI because of some of the trauma their workers were experiencing. So there's a lot of ethical dimensions that we need to explore with this, and I think we're just scratching the surface.
Yeah, I agree. Well, all right. Well, with that, I think we've kind of wrapped it up here on this one. We've kind of gone through some steps that you, as an organizational leader and organizations, can think about AI. Obviously, this is not completely comprehensive, and I want to thank ChatGPT for giving us the beginnings of this list. It actually, got us started. So, obviously, Dan and I are going to be talking a lot more about this as we move forward. This is huge right now. I think we've
created a whole channel on this on our. If you go to our playlist, rather, we created a whole playlist on our channel for this. So we started this conversation way back in January. And so with Jack Wang, and you can go back and check out that initial podcast where we began our conversation last week's, this week's, and in the future we'll be adding to that playlist.
Okay, folks. Well, thanks for joining us. Join us at the
Make sure to like and subscribe if you got any value out of this episode.
Yep.
And
we'll see you next time.
Tell your friends, family, because the YouTube algorithm does not really help us that much. So we need to start relying on word of mouth.
It's not very intelligent. I don't like its artificial intelligence.
No.
Yeah. Or maybe it is. Maybe there's something we should learn. Yeah. But hey, people, see you next time. So cheers.
Next time. Peace out.
Later.